So, welcome to the RecWired Podcast. Haven't done one of these in a while, so I don't know whether that's just me being lazy or we're just going to call it season two. But delighted to have as our first guest of season two, or me getting back into doing these, however you want to frame it. We've got Josh Bramhall from My Digital. So I'll let you introduce yourself, Josh. Tell us who you are, what you do.
Thanks for having me, Andy. It's a pleasure to be your first guest of season two. We'll go with that because it sounds like we've been more organised than the other option. Hello, thank you for having me. I'm Josh Bramhall. I'm the sales director at My Digital. My Digital are a software provider in the temporary labour space. We support organisations that engage temporary workers, is I suppose the headline of what we do. What that means in reality is we work with recruitment agencies and payroll providers to take away a lot of the burdensome, a lot of the difficult back office tasks. Quite the laborious admin tasks, and we automate and digitise their processes to make it easier to engage temporary workers.
So you're a software company making it easier for recruits, basically, and umbrella companies.
Correct. Yeah. You put it much more succinctly than me.
I try and do my best, but break it down. Recruiters are simple in terms of their sort of okay. Let's just be really clear what it is we've got. So tell us about yourself. How did you end up in the staffing or the software space? I guess depending on what you want your valuation to look like.
Yeah, so I've worked in the contracting market since about 2014. I got into it through a company called Brookson. I'm from Warrington originally, and anybody that knows Warrington knows that it is a hotbed of payroll and contracting companies. Most people will have been onto the particular business part that I'm talking about, where I think there's 4, maybe 5 umbrella companies. So yeah, I got into that market in 2014, worked there, supporting recruitment agencies through a lot of legislative challenges. And then in 2017, I joined the software side of things. So I was, and again, dependent on how grand I want to make it sound, I was either employee number 3 or I was one of the early employees at My Digital. So I joined unbeknownstly just before the public sector changes came in, and that's IR35. I'm sure I'm sure you've done podcasts on that sort of stuff previously, and I'm sure all the audience are more than familiar with IR35. But yeah, I joined My Digital in 2017. We had a single client at the time, which was an umbrella company, and then I stayed with the business until late 2021. And by which point we were working with 50 recruitment agencies and payroll companies, supporting them with our technology. So yeah, that was a steep learning curve, both in terms of the contracting market and also in terms of scaling a technology company. We made many mistakes in that period of time, but we learned a heck of a lot. We took our first round of external funding through a company called Maven, which professionalized the business overnight, and we went from 4 employees to just shy of 30 employees within an 18-month period. So yeah, the business was unrecognizable in that short period of time. And then in October 2021, I left My Digital, and I went to work for a workforce management solution in the public sector. I got to a position at My Digital where we'd achieved a heck of a lot, but I just wanted to sort of, I suppose, like all sales guys, test myself, see if I was really good at sales.
You've been in that growing space for years, basically, and you wanted to go and do something different, yeah?
Basically, yeah, and just see whether I was actually any good or whether I just got lucky, and the business was well positioned and at a right time to challenge the market. So yeah, I went and worked for a public sector workforce management company, but what that really did was it gave me great exposure to end clients and the challenges that they've got in managing vast volumes of temporary workers. So I'd always seen the supply chain from the bottom up, from payroll and umbrella through to recruitment agencies, whereas now I was getting a real good perspective from the top down. So I went and worked there for 18 months and made a success of that business, and then the timing was just right, I suppose, in terms of things that were happening at My Digital, people that moved on, so my position was available again. Any of your members that know John Whelan will know how persistent he can be. So yeah, John and I had a couple of meetings and conversations, and I decided to come back and work at My Digital. And I suppose one of the best things about getting exposure elsewhere is that you never really you never really know what you don't know until you go elsewhere and test yourself. So yeah, like I say, I learned a heck of a lot about public sector, about clients and the challenges and the headaches they have in managing temporary workers, and some good things about business strategy and scaling sales teams, which are more, we're implementing now at My Digital.
So tell us a bit about John. You've mentioned him a couple of times. For those who don't know John, how would you describe John Whelan?
uh, Being careful because I know that he'll probably listen to this. So John is one of the most charismatic people I've ever met. He's also one of the most educated on the taxation of temporary workers. Is probably the best way to summarise it. So using one of his own phrases, John says that he knows so much about this market because he's done nothing else since the early 1990s. So yeah, John has started and sold a number of payroll companies. He's worked closely with founding members of recruitment agencies, supporting them in, again, mainly the engagement of temporary workers. But John has always done what he's done with a smile on his face and without taking himself too seriously. So I think John and I are quite aligned in that sense. One of the mantras that John has that he taught me early on in our career together was, what's the point in going to work if you can't have fun? And you wouldn't get most chief execs that are trying to scale and exit a successful software company saying that sort of thing. So that hopefully gives people a bit of an insight into John Whelan.
Yeah, he's a bit of a force of nature. You guys won the contracting awards last year, and to say he was quite pleased about it, bit of an understatement.
I wasn't there, but I think he may have shed a few tears. And John is, again, it's that emotion in John that makes him so good at what he does. But for John and for everyone here in My Digital, it was just such a good statement from an external or from a third party body, a bit of appreciation of the hard work they've put in over the last few years, because we've taken this business now. Each week there are about 70,000 contractors that either submit timesheets or have their payroll processed through our software. And if you'd have told John and I and the other early members of employees that we'd have done that when we had less than 1,000 going through the software each week, we would have thought that was beyond our wildest dreams. So yeah, it was a proud moment winning that award, and we've been fortunate enough since then to pick up a couple of other awards as well.
So what's it like, you being and moving from that umbrella side of the business to a software business? What are the big differences? Because I get that the industry's close, but what's the big differences for the listeners and the watchers in terms of moving from a payroll company to a software company?
Mm-hmm. So I think one of the biggest changes, the biggest realizations for me is, so recruitment agencies and umbrella companies are working closer together than they ever have done. The new legislation that's introduced into the temporary labour market with each budget is, it is growing, and it means that engaging temporary workers for clients or recruitment agencies and umbrella companies is fraught with risk. So one of the big changes from just supporting agencies with the payroll service to move into the software side has been engaging workers, whether you're an agency or an umbrella company, engaging temporary workers at volume is a really, really difficult task. Probably not the most eloquent way of delivering it, but it's a really tough thing to do. So our software exists to make that a heck of a lot easier. And again, I'll coin another one of John's phrases. He always says that temporary recruitment agencies and umbrella companies are a bit like sausage factories. You need to be able to put in mass volume at the front end and ensure that everything goes through the same process and comes out in the same manner. And through the utilisation of technology, both in sausage factories and in the temporary workforce space, you can ensure that happens. So yeah, our technology enables you, whether you handle a single worker or whether some of our clients handle 8,000-9,000 workers a week, you can follow the same processes and ensure that you're compliant and ensure that you're essentially protecting your margin by being able to operate at volume.
Fair enough, makes perfect sense. So what's going to be different for you this time? Is it going to be a Ronaldo return to Old Trafford, or you on the upswing or the downswing, do you think?
I'm trying to think of a footballer that's had a more successful return to a club. I'm a Liverpool fan, so maybe the return of Robbie Fowler to Liverpool. Hopefully it'll be more along those lines. In terms of what's going to be different this time, well, the company itself has changed massively in the last 18 months. I don't know if you've ever left a business, Andy, and then returned to it in any sort of form, but you never realise when you're in a company how much you're growing and how much you're changing, sorry, on a day-to-day basis. It's not until you step away from that company and almost forget about what's going on and then return that you see that the changes that have been made. So from a technical perspective, we've done releases every 5 weeks since I've been gone. So the product is almost unrecognisable in a good way compared to what it was 18 months ago. The organisation itself, so we've moved to new offices recently, we've hired loads of new people, the company personnel, the personnel in the company and the culture has changed massively. So in terms of what's going to be different this time, I mentioned earlier that we were a startup last time and that had its own challenges. We're now firmly in scale up mode. So trying to go from 70,000 to a million pay slips presents, vastly different challenges and changes than it did going from 1,000 to 70,000. So yeah, hopefully the main similarity will be the success that we had in terms of new client acquisition, product innovation, and supporting the temporary workforce to engage temporary workers. That'll be the same, but there's going to be a heck of a lot of new challenges that we'll face that I'm excited for. And I think we're well positioned, as I say, with the people and the technology that we've got to take advantage of those changes.
I think what's interesting, you talk about how companies have changed, and I've not gone back, and I probably I don't think it's right for either of us to ever go back, because I look at something like S3, and both from an external perspective looking in, but also when I speak to people there, it's pretty unrecognisable. And I only left 3 years ago, and they're doing significantly better without me. So maybe that's a good thing. But organisations do move on. They do change, and actually, probably if I do it differently again, I wouldn't have done 20 years at the same place.
Yeah, but I think companies need to change as well. It'd be a lot more worrying if I'd have returned and everything was exactly the same. And if nothing, what a wasted 18 months that would have been for the business. So, whether or not it was the right decision to leave, it was a decision that was made. The company moved on, I moved on, and we both, grew and learned new things in that time. And I think we're both better positioned now to make the most of it. But yeah, I think, it's a reflection, not necessarily but the workforce at the moment is a lot more transient than it ever has been. If you look at my parents and the careers that they had one or two employers over their careers. People that are coming through now, I'm 32 and I've had 5 employers, and I don't. I think that's the norm. A couple of my mates will take the mick out of me for that, but I think that's the norm, and that's the way that the workforce in the UK is going.
I think there's something to be said for how you leave a company as well. And I was super lucky that it was very good natured, good return. The fact you're back there is probably testament to that fact as well. So I think actually it often pains me to see when people leave recruitment companies. Recruitment companies especially have got massive churn, and I always have so much more respect for the people that go. They do a proper handover. They go and do their own thing. Chances are they're going to a competitor, or they're setting up their own thing. But how you sort of exit really says probably more about you than how you join.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, I think to your point, it's the market that we work in, the recruitment, the payroll world. It's a small market, so even being at the drinks after the recruitment expo the other night, the amount of people in that room that have worked, I've either worked with previously or we've had working relationships with their previous employers. And I think to your point, you can always judge a company or a person on how they treat their leavers. So ending that relationship on a positive note is absolutely the right thing to do, because who knows where somebody will end up, and who knows at which point a former employer of yours will be working for a company that you go to interview for example. So you've got to be careful how you leave it, and I think we always take that mantra as well, because another one of the challenges of scaling a company is you do unfortunately lose clients. It's just the cyclical nature of the contracts and the way that the work. So we always are very conscious of the way that we treat our customers as they move on. So we've had one or two agencies and payroll providers since I've left that have moved on, but we still maintain personal relationships with all of the people at those companies. And that's something that we've been very conscious to do because, again, you just never know. It's a much smaller market than most people realise.
Yeah, I mean it's incestuous, and I would say there's a lot of people go into recruitment, but there's not a lot of people stay. So estimates sort of around recruitment reckon it to be somewhere in the region of 150,000 people in the UK. Um, but I reckon there's probably only a few thousand that have done more than 10 years. So
Yeah.
for example, and I think most of them bowl accounts were the required drinks on Tuesday night as well.
Definitely, definitely. I think, yeah, and one thing that we've noticed as well, in my tenure here is we work quite successfully with startup recruitment agencies, if you can call them that. You've probably had more exposure to this than I have, but we noticed that those that do a long tenure in the recruitment market after 5 or 10 years tend to set up on their own because a little bit like the umbrella market, the recruitment market is very similar. There are no barriers to entry. You and I tomorrow could set up a new company and we could provide payroll services or we could provide recruitment services. So, and I think that's a great thing. It's a great thing for promoting entrepreneurs and promoting innovation. So, again, whenever we work with a business, we're always really conscious that the big billers at those agencies are likely going to set up on their own in the next few years. And we've already got a couple of examples where we've worked and provided our timesheet, our pay and bill software to those individuals when they've set up their new businesses. So, yeah, and again, that just goes to what we're saying. It's a small market. I mean, it's not. If you look at the turnover and the revenues in this market, it's anything but small. But I mean, in terms of the personalities that operate in it, it's a small market.
So, what are you seeing at the moment? So, one of the things that having 70,000 workers on your books is going to be pretty useful for is giving us a view on the market. And that's what I reckon the majority of our listeners and watchers want to know. How is it? And depending on how you speak to, it's a great market, poor market, average market. But, what's your take?
Yeah, I thought you might ask me this, so I was doing a bit of analysis on our volumes this morning, and the one thing that I would say that might be contrary to what people think is the temporary labour market at the moment is buoyant. We're seeing one thing that we did see was a slower return to normal volumes after Christmas than we've maybe seen in previous years. Normally our volumes recover by mid-Jan, whereas this time it was probably the start of Feb before our volumes had got to pre-Christmas levels. So, but now they've got to those levels, we're seeing our clients growing at a quicker rate than they ever have done. So our clients, don't forget, recruitment agencies and umbrella companies. So as clients are hiring and engaging with more temporary workers, our volumes, naturally grow. We also have some new client acquisition in the mix as well. But no, we're absolutely seeing a buoyant market at the moment, and I think I don't necessarily have any evidence or data to back this up, but I think that's a reflection of the uncertain economic times that the country's in. When times like this are happening, big end clients tend to rely more on temporary workers because it's quite a crude way of looking at it, but they like the fact that they can bring in talent on short-term projects and hire, but also unfortunately fire at will. So if their business is impacted by the economy, then they've got a big chunk of their workforce that are temporary, and they can move them on. So it's quite a crude way of looking at it. They also, again, in my experience, like the fact that they can engage with temporary workers for specific projects. And temporary workers, let's not forget, are humongously skilled individuals. So bringing in those teams of skilled individuals to deliver projects is another advantage of the temporary workforce. So yeah, we're seeing a buoyant market. We're seeing a lot of construction start to pick up, I suppose, as the nights get lighter, as the ground's getting softer. The construction industry is working longer days on bigger projects. So yeah, we're seeing a good upturn in terms of volume.
70,000 pay slips. So there must be so much pressure on that many people relying on you guys. So what happens if it doesn't work out so well?
Well, if it doesn't, you probably hear some commotion out there in the office. But yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. And one of the big things, so we're a cloud-based solution. We host on AWS, and one of the big advantages of our technologies is the fact that everybody, so all our agencies, all our umbrella providers, they're always on the latest version. They're on a single version. Every few weeks, we release new features, new functionality, legislative updates into that environment for them. One of the big challenges that comes with that, though, is obviously we're a big target for cyber attacks. It's no secret that the temporary industry, the temporary staffing market, has been attacked, quite aggressively over the years. If you look at the volumes of personal data, but also the volumes of cash that move around in this market, it makes sense that the scammers will try and attack it. And we were actually in 2020, we were victims of a cyber attack. So we'd always done everything we could in terms of our defences and making sure that we thought we were impenetrable. Unfortunately, a small corner of our system was accessed. We noticed it within minutes, and we managed to shut it down and limit any impact. Now, most businesses wouldn't talk about that and would probably shy away from it and brush it under the carpet. But what we did was we took that lesson and we took our security to another level. So we've been through things like ISO accreditations over the last 18 months. We work with a partner called Mitigo to do constant penetration testing and testing on our internal devices. And we've got Cyber Essentials Plus. So we are constantly going through processes to ensure that that data is as secure as it can be on behalf of our clients. So that's one of the big challenges with working in such volumes. And the other is performance, because we need to be aware that there is a scenario potentially where all 70,000 timesheets or payslips could be run simultaneously. So if that was to ever happen, we've had to stress test our software to ensure that it can deal with it. And again, they're the sort of things that when you partner with a software provider, people don't necessarily appreciate or even ask those questions, but they're the sort of work that our CTO and our COO have been working on non-stop over the last few years, just to ensure that should that very specific scenario ever occur, that we can deal with it. So yeah, the two big challenges for us with that sort of volume are definitely security and speed, and we're quite proud of both of those aspects.
And you acted as DR, didn't you, for a couple of those companies, disaster recovery that were hit, and actually kept a lot of people being paid. I guess I don't know if you're actually allowed to talk about that, but
But we did, and it's something that I touched on earlier about when these sort of challenges occur, we innovated on the back of it, because there was a period of time, if we just focus on the umbrella market for a moment, there was a period of time where probably all umbrella companies in the UK over a 6-month period were subject to some sort of cyber attack. So what we did was we innovated, and the client base that we work with, we had disaster recovery processes in place and they were never impacted. But what we did was the clients that we didn't work with, we offered them a disaster recovery solution to ensure that if anything was to happen, then without any notable downtime, they could spin up an instance on our software and they could pay their workers, because pay is, it's an emotional subject when it's going well. If you have 70,000 people or any number of people that aren't paid, it can be catastrophic. So yeah, we like to think that we do our part to ensure the temporary labour, temporary market in the UK get paid every Friday.
fair enough. Makes perfect sense. I think it's really interesting the space you're going into, because a lot of recruitment companies have used umbrellas. I guess your software says actually you don't need to. You can just use our software and you don't need an umbrella company. It's going to be quite difficult for you to navigate that between umbrellas being your customers and potentially saying do you need an umbrella? You can just
Yeah, you probably see my reaction. I was about to cut you off. I was like, no, we're not saying that by any stretch. I mean, one thing, and I think I referenced it earlier, is we've seen over. So let's say I've been here now since 2017 with a bit of time away. Umbrella companies, recruitment agencies, and then clients, the entire supply chain are having to work closer together, because I mean, it's all driven by government and HMRC and their digital strategy. Government and HMRC, whether or not they like temporary workers, the big challenge they've got with temporary workers in the UK is tracking individuals and their tax liabilities. we touched on earlier, if we were employed with a single employer for 20 years, it's really easy for HMRC to track you. In the current, in the modern world, people are working for multiple employers, sometimes within a single year. So HMRC's digital initiative is to try and ensure that they can track those workers and they can manage their tax liability. So what our technology enables companies to do is essentially work to the same strategy as HMRC, to digitise their back office and to be able to submit to HMRC in real time. So to answer your question, what our technology actually does for recruitment agencies is, first and foremost, we digitise the timesheet process and the billing and the invoicing process. But our timesheet software talks directly to our payroll software for umbrella companies. So gone are the days of on a Monday having to collate all the timesheets from the previous week, be that from multiple different systems, be it from manual, enter that into spreadsheets and then to email those spreadsheets over to umbrella companies. What you can do now is in real time, when timesheets are authorised by clients and invoiced, you can send the files to the umbrella company digitally. So umbrella companies in real time, should they choose, can process payroll and make payments to workers. So what we're actually seeing is, rather than the recruitment agencies saying, we don't need umbrella companies now, is they're actually starting to embrace umbrella companies. And if they're in the My Digital ecosystem, so we've got a couple of agencies that I can think of that work with 4 or 5 of our umbrella companies, and we've got all the API configuration done in the back end with them. So on a Monday morning or throughout the week, as I said, they send all that pay data to the umbrella companies, and the umbrella companies in real time can generate payroll and pay the workers. So the relationships from a back office perspective are actually closer than they've ever been. And something that enables recruitment agencies to do is to truly understand the payroll companies that they're working with, because data can be pushed back as well. So they can see the true pay models that the workers are on, they can see deductions, etc., that are being made. So, a bit of a buzz terminology in the space at the moment is transparency. And we think we're facilitating that with our tech stack. So
you can just do so for agencies, you can just do the timesheet piece as well, yeah?
Yeah, so you can do the timesheet piece, and you can do agency PAYE in the software as well. So that's a part of the temporary labour market that does exist. Some agencies do say to their temporary workers, there's an option to go on our payroll, so we can facilitate all of that as well. We can do everything from, and marketing will shout at me now because I might not get this right, but everything from a minute on a timesheet right the way through to payroll calculations and all your submissions to HMRC. Can be whatever form that takes, whether it's PAYE, umbrella, that can all be managed in our technology.
So last question, what does the roadmap look for? We're having this chat, in a year's time. Hopefully you're still at United, you've not fallen out with the manager again or whatever. So what does My Digital look like?
Yeah, so I think what we're trying to do at My Digital is, to that point that I've just made, is to ensure that in this temporary labour market, the supply chain, digitise their back office process, remove any of the time consuming admin tasks, and increase the speed from a worker completing the work to a worker being paid. That's essentially why we exist. We do have a vision of ensuring that by 2032 there are 1 million pay slips or 1 million payments handled through our platform. So it's going to be a busy year. So yeah, that's the vision for My Digital, is to facilitate the digitisation of back office systems in the temporary labour market.
Awesome. Sounds awesome. Well, I wish you well on that. Thanks for coming to the drink the other night. Sorry I couldn't make it, but I heard my business partner drank for the 3 of us. So
no, you know what? We did. We got to meet. All the guys from there. Not that many of them will remember, because I think we got there about an hour late, and they were making the most of the free drinks from Pager. So thank you to Pager for that. Shout out to Pager.
100%. Right, really good to catch up with you again,
Thank you, Andy. Likewise.
Cheers. See you soon, and good luck into that 1 million.
Thank you very much. Cheers.